In order to fit this big, chunky, full depth interior, I needed something that was going to fit under here. This is the only transmission tunnel part there is, and it fits just perfectly on the SSD one. So if you're not familiar with the axial SCX10 II chassis, I'll show you quickly how much of it I've taken out. Both of the sideboards, they've come off the original plastic ones, basically because of this waterproof receiver box. Works well, but it's moulded on, so that was going to get in the way of the interior. The battery tray that had to come out, that mounts in the front. The steering servo mounts in that as well. There's a little cross brace that had to come off, and then most importantly, the transmission. This is the stock transmission. As you can see, I've half painted that matte black. This usually sits right in the middle on that skid plate there, that way around. Obviously well in the way of the interior. I've obviously had to cut through for the suspension towers. I was a bit concerned that was going to look odd up under there with the shocks just disappearing behind the arch, because normally obviously they'd be visible in the arch. I don't think it looks too weird or too obviously weird. Luckily the rear seat goes just there with the towers just behind it in the boot there. As you can see, I've had to make a few modifications, principally these holes for the shock towers. In order to get it right down on the chassis rails, I've also had to slightly thin the plastic here. This is all very thick, substantial plastic. I've just used a Dremel and just cut away through here to clear this cross member on here. This big slot out the back is the most recent thing, and that's to do with this RC run mount. It's very nice. It needs to slide in like that. You put the body on, push it back out, and then do up bolts on here, and that holds the body on. It needs to be able to push in, but this fouls it. So I've just trimmed a little hole to let it move in just a little. I'm not sure I've done enough. I can always go in a bit more, but the battery's going to have to live in here anyway. Because an important part of this new transmission is that it runs straight down the centre of the chassis. So the servo, which was mounted here, can't go there anymore. That has to go across the front in that way. Fortunately for me, the body mounts for the RC Run shell include a servo mount as it is. So that solved that. Easy as pie, went straight in. I've temporarily stuck the ESC on the wheel well, which is probably going to stay there. I've ordered some more of these actually. These are GCM, or no, not GCM. Can't remember. But I've trimmed them pretty heavily to fit under the LC80 body. One complicating factor of trying to make this sit right down on the chassis rails is this lip. Getting the body on isn't actually that easy if the interior is going to stay on the chassis, and I want it to stay on the chassis because I need it to hold the battery. As you can see, there's no room up here for a battery. I could just about squeeze one under the bonnet. I think the bonnet level's just above there. But there's all this heat here with the motor and the gearbox and steering servo and the ESC, so I don't think that's a good idea. So the battery's going to have to go in the back, which is not great for weight distribution purposes, but it's really the only place. And it'll be quite easily disguised sitting in the boot, pretending to be luggage. Ideally, I want to bolt this to the chassis, and it'll just stay on the chassis. So the body shell I'm still happy with. I've done a bit to it now. Didn't sand it, just scuffed it down just to help the paint stick a bit better, just to key the surface. It did need a little bit of trimming. There was some sort of ugly flashing around the inside of the windows. The sprues, I suppose they are pretty chunky, and in some areas, at the back in particular, they were so thick that I actually had to cut them off near the edge and then slowly trim down and recreate the shape, because if you just cut them off it would take a big chunk out of the moulding itself, the body itself. Particularly since I've taken that gloss off, you can see some stress lines in the plastic seemingly from when it was moulded. Possibly it wasn't hot enough when it was injected, not really sure. This body's so thick, I don't think that's going to be a problem with longevity or falling apart. The only thing I'm not totally happy with, and I don't know if I can really show it properly, is the moulding across here. It's very wibbly wobbly. It's not a nice smooth curve at all, so I can feel it actually. It's not all that well moulded there, maybe because the plastic's so thick. So I'm going to sand this flat, or try to sand this all more flat. It's very thick plastic, so I don't think I'm going to have to use any filler in it. I think I should be able to get away with it. One last thing that I've done or started doing is murderizing a driver. He's looking a bit sorry for himself. I had to chop a fair amount off. There you go. It's going to be like that. So that's it for part 2 of this build. Thank you for joining me once again. Next time I'll have done some more things. I'll have failed to do other things. If you want to know what those things are, then by all means come back for part 3. But in the meantime, don't have nightmares. Don't worry about him. He's fine. He's a professional. And I'll see you next time.